Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation. A busy episode of Canucks Conversation as we're going to preview a game that has serious playoff implications. Weird that we're saying that in late January, but we are talking about that. John Forsland of Prime Monday Night Hockey joins the program later on. We're going to talk about the Canucks game against the Capitals, and we've got some new sponsors to tell you about. It's a busy show. Harman, how was the weekend?
It was great. I'm loving the weather lately. I loved seeing the Rant and Blockbuster trade, just seeing the NHL when there are NBA style, just like superstars changing teams. I still remember how excited I was the day the Matthew Tkachuk, Jonathan Huberdeau trade went down. I just think it's good for the game. It's exciting. It's fun. Fans love it. And to see that going down on a Friday night, it just was an awesome way to kind of kick off the weekend.
I think that's where we're going to start today's show. We're going to start today's show talking about that Ranston and Blockbuster with him going to the Carolina Hurricanes. Canucks Conversation is brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. And Harm, the chat is bumping right now, which makes it a good time for me to tell everybody about our Super Chat and our Super Chat charity partner this season, the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show? Hit us with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go directly to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. An exchange of some players on Friday afternoon, as you alluded to, and we did Friday's episode, and we were very heavily talking about maybe something happens, maybe we have to do an emergency show. I promise I didn't have any intel beyond the Canucks were working on something. That was all I got told, because people in the chat were saying, oh, what do you know? What do you know? All I knew was that they were working on something. Reports are now suggesting that what they were working on was a potential Elias Pettersson trade with the Carolina Hurricanes that would have, you assume, brought back a similar package to what Colorado got for Mikko Rantanen, but the Hurricanes electing to go with the package they were being offered from the Avs, and that package, of course, Mikko Rantanen. It wasn't a package. It was just Mikko Rantanen was the big deal. And of course they get Taylor Hall as well. You mentioned it's good for the game. I think that's where my opinion on this trade starts as well, Harm, is that it's awesome to see a player like this moved. It's different. It's not something we see all the time, but it also, like, even on Friday when I was talking about, you got to make some moves, you got to make some trades. Everybody talking about how hard it is to make trades. It's not that hard. It's not. It's also the general manager's job to make trades. It's not that hard. They did it. They got it done. Maybe it was hard because they had to get retention from Chicago and there's different parts to it. But they got it done and it's good for the game. I love to see it.
Yeah, the Hurricanes.
Harman moved his mic, so naturally it muted. There he goes.
Naturally got muted. I was saying Carolina is uniquely positioned because they're one of the only contenders in the NHL that 1 second, I got to change mic setting again.
As you do that, I want to quickly give a shout out to Jeff Merrick. The Sheet with Jeff Merrick. Merrick had Eric Tulsky on the show today, and Tulsky was an open book. Tulsky's talking about this trade. He's talking about the conversations with other teams, not getting into specifics, of course, but it was a really good conversation with Eric Tulsky, and he spoke about ownership and how the owner he has out in Carolina is okay with them not batting 100 or not batting 1,000 on trades. And if they make, I think the quote he gave was, if they make 5 trades and only 3 of them work out, the owner realizes that more often than not, that's going to mean success for the hockey club. So you want to be making trades and you want to be out there. And he enabled them to make this trade out in Carolina. So I thought it was a really good interview from Tulsky. And I know that, always comes across as, oh, you're just shouting it out because it's a Nation Network podcast. But honestly, Jeff Merrick's fantastic. But Tulsky on the show today, excellent listen if you haven't listened to it already. And some very topical stuff there as well when it comes to the Canucks' current situation. Brock Besser, a pending UFA. How are the Canucks going to deal with that? But Harm, you want to talk about the trade?
Yeah, so Canes have about $40 million in cap space in the offseason if we assume a $97 million cap ceiling, which is the latest estimate that agent Alan Walsh had shared on his podcast. How many contenders can walk into an offseason with $40 million in cap space? And so the problem Colorado had was, sure, they could afford a Rantanen extension on paper, but they were pressed up so tight to the cap that it would have required cuts and sacrifices on other parts of the roster where the Avs are already a really top-heavy team. They would have had to further weaken their depth to keep Rantanen on the books. Not to mention Makar is not too far from needing a major raise and an extension himself. So that's the difference between Colorado and Carolina, where you look at Carolina's cap situation. Their highest paid forward, Sebastian Aho, is under $10 million. They only have one forward who makes $8 million or more. You look at their highest paid defenseman for next season is Jacob Slavin, under $6.5 million. And he's their only defenseman on the books next season that makes even $4 million or more. In goal, they barely invest any money. So that's why I really love this trade for the Hurricanes, is because they're positioned to make a serious pitch to keep him. And the other thing, too, is a lot of people have mentioned the risk of, well, that was a lot to give up if he ends up walking in free agency the way that Jake Gensel did. And I understand that risk factor. But the other thing to keep in mind is Marty Necas is a UFA at the end of next season, too. And the way Necas is trending, having a breakout season this year, he's going to want the bag, too. Now, Necas isn't going to command a Rantanen type mega extension. But I can tell you this, just looking at the way the Canes were handling Necas' contract situation last summer, they weren't going to be the ones to give him $8, $9, $10 million on a long-term extension. So for them, Necas, I don't think he's as valuable of a trade chip as people may view on the outside. Like, he's not the cost control piece that people may think. You get one extra year, but Colorado's going to have to make a decision on Necas at the end of next season too. And that's why I really love this trade for the Hurricanes.
What do you think of Jack Drury? I hear his analytics are really good. Tyson Cole, associate editor over at Canucks Army, big Jack Drury guy. What do you think of him?
We'll see. I mean, I think he's ultimately a bottom six center. Now, the Avs have had issues at 3C, so I think the hope for them is that he can slot in and be that third line center. I'm not convinced yet that he can be a full-time third line center on a contending team. And Carolina was an odd spot where Drury isn't good enough to be a 2C, but they had Jordan Stahl as a third line checking center. He's their defensive dynamo. So the way I'd frame Drury is he may be good enough to be a full-time third line center, but we don't know that for sure. And so he's a fine secondary piece, but when you're trading away a player of Rantanen's caliber, he's not a huge needle mover.
This trade as a whole, I wanted to get this off my chest. We were talking on Friday about trading players and how it's so hard to do, and whenever you bring up Brock Besser, whenever you bring up JT Miller, whenever you bring up Elias Pettersson, whenever you bring up a Canuck and talk about maybe it's an idea to trade them and change up the core a little bit, people get very defensive. I get it. Fans like players. Fans are fans of the players on the Canucks. I get it. But when you see what the Avs were able to do with a guy of Rantanen's stature, and yeah, you got the interview from Nate McKinnon, where he's clearly disappointed in the trade. Your players know it's a business, and you're in the business of winning, and you're trying to win the cup. Your players have to understand to some level that you're trying to make the team better, and sometimes things just aren't good enough, or you have to look ahead in the case of the Avs, which is what they're doing with this trade. So why is it so crazy to talk about trading a Brock Besser if you can't get him signed? Like, it's not punting on the season. It's not saying we're entering a rebuild. Moving a core piece doesn't have to mean that you're blowing it up and you're quitting and you're saying we're not going to compete anymore. That's not what the Avs are doing. The Avs are not even retooling. They're just restructuring. And I think that's when you talk about trading a core piece for the Canucks. Like, that's how the conversation needs to be, is figure out what your direction is, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know exactly what the management group wants. But if they're planning on restructuring, like, you can do it with a Pettersson trade. You can do it with a Miller trade. You can do it with a Brock Besser trade. And I know there's going to be people, when I say all three of those names, there's going to be people say, don't trade Pettersson, don't trade Miller, don't trade Besser. I get it. I get what you're saying, and I'm not sitting here telling you which one they should trade and which one they shouldn't trade. I've done a lot of that lately. But if you're going to trade one of these players, it doesn't mean you're blowing it up. Like, let's lose the Stockholm Syndrome stuff here. When you trade one of these pieces, we just saw it on Friday, that trading one of these pieces doesn't mean you're starting up some rebuild plan or you're punting on the season. It doesn't have to mean that. That's not what the Avs did. They're looking to the future, and ultimately, like, that's what I want to see the Canucks do, is if they make a trade here, which they should. They absolutely should make a trade. I've said that for the past couple weeks. They need to make a trade, in my opinion. You can get something back that keeps you competitive.
Yeah, it's all about reloading for next season, with the eye on icing as competitive a team as possible to ensure that in 2 years' time, Quinn Hughes wants to re-sign as a Vancouver Canuck. I'll also say this because the multiple national insiders were bringing up the whole Vancouver element as far as how close they were with Carolina, and specifically over the weekend as well. We heard Elliot Friedman continuing to sort of report about how the Canucks are listening on Elias Pettersson. He mentioned the Buffalo Sabres as a team to potentially keep an eye on that front. What I will say is if the Canucks are choosing between taking, this is kind of how I'm viewing it as far as the situation the Canucks are in. It seems like from the outside that they've been shopping Miller and they're kind of coming to the realization that he doesn't have a lot of value on the trade market right now. At the same time, I wonder if part of the thought process has been, well, if the proposals here are really lackluster, meanwhile, Elias Pettersson's trade value is still really high, then does that mean we may lean towards trading Pettersson instead of Miller? And I think that's likely the internal debate that's happening within the front office. And what I want to put out there is my take, looking at it now, is if they're choosing between Pettersson and Miller, right? Let's run on that hypothetical. Let's say they have to pick one. I'd much rather see them move Miller for an underwhelming return than see them trade Elias Pettersson.
Agreed. I wish I could play devil's advocate. I can't. That's what I agree to. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And again, I understand why you may look at the Miller trade proposals and say, well, do we want to get negligible value back when our other potential number one center could actually get us a lucrative haul? The problem is, even then, you're still going to have a really tough time winning that trade, especially when the center that you're keeping then is going to turn 32 years old in less than a couple of months. To bring up the Sabres example, what does a package look like for Elias Pettersson? Is it around Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram? What you want to trade for potentially a $7 million second line center whose contract Sabres fans already regret? And a second pair D-man who also needs a massive new contract this summer because he's an RFA with arbitration rights.
Not to mention has had concussion problems.
Exactly. So it's combined, Cousins and Byram are going to cost $14 million against the cap. They're going to be more expensive than Pettersson. At that point, the contractual risks that you'd be taking on with Cousins and Byram, I'd rather bet on Pettersson. Yep. Even though that contract looks like a risk right now, and he's not close to living up to it right now, I'd still be in a position where I'd rather bet on Pettersson and hope that he bounces back.
And I think anybody who's listened to this show for more than a week knows that I cannot, even for the sake of good hockey conversation and playing devil's advocate, which I like to do, cannot disagree with you. I can't disagree. You just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly how they should be approaching this, in my humble opinion. Anything else you want to say about this Blockbuster trade, Harm? I just keep looking at it through the Canucks lens. Quit clutching at your pearls when it comes to anybody on this team. And we just gave our opinion. Yeah, you should probably try and keep Elias Pettersson in these trades. But don't keep giving me this. No, give the core more time. Give the core more time. You can't enter a rebuild. Who was it? I think it was, where'd it go? Someone in the chat. Rajcraft, regular listener of the show. He said people only think you're either in a rebuild or are contending. This is something I'd like to get NHL general managers and front office personnel's opinions on. The parity in the league. We've talked about how close the pack is. There's no real top team and then bottom team. It's a lot of middle of the pack teams is what we're seeing this season. I'm wondering if we start to see, and we've already talked about how this could affect the trade deadline and everything. I'm wondering if we start to see more trades like this, where teams are like, okay, you know what? We don't want trades. And in fact, trades that give us futures. In fact, on the sheet today with Jeff Merrick, one thing Tulsky said is, we could have offered 11 first rounders to Colorado, and I don't think they would have taken it. And again, he's talking about how they made the trade work and how it had to work for both sides. Maybe on paper, 11 first rounders is better, but they're trying to compete right now, so that's not really something that they would look at. So I found that really interesting. I really like Eric Tulsky, I must say. I think I've called him a nerd in the past. but I really liked what he had to say on the sheet today with Jeff Merrick. And look, like, it's his rookie year as an NHL GM, basically, and he's doing a pretty good job so far. And I do wonder if this is a change in the trends that we see here, Harm, where with all the parity in the league, with all the middle of the pack teams, that we see more of these trades where it's like, okay, no, we're trying to compete, but maybe we can make our team better, or look at the future a little bit more while staying competitive. I wonder if we see more of these trades.
I would love to see a league where GMs are more bold, think outside the box, are creative, go for it. There are too many situations around the league where GMs are scared to make a mistake. They're scared of shaking up their core, and to a certain extent, I get it, because oftentimes when some of these teams are in situations where they're thinking, okay, maybe we got to move a core piece. It's from a position where you're dealing from weakness rather than strength. But even then, I mean, like, to look at the Sabres, for example, that's been a massive criticism of Kevin Adams over the last few years, is what has he done to try and actually move the needle as far as trades, or just trying to improve his team, thinking outside of the box, being a little bit bold. And that's where hopefully, again, I would love to see GMs follow in Tulsky's footsteps, and have a league where teams are just, and not recklessly going for it, but would be willing to take calculated risks.
Okay, I don't know if I need to talk about the Chicago aspect of this. People brought up a good point, and in fact, Tulsky, again, on the sheet, which if you haven't, go listen to it, folks. The sheet with Jeff Merrick. Eric Tulsky was on the program today. He did a great job. Now, I really found it interesting how he was talking about, where was I going with this? I just completely lost my train of thought. Hit it on the bingo card. Unfortunately, I did just lose my train of thought. I don't know why, but he was talking about a lot of good stuff on that show. I found it interesting. Now were you
going to make a quick... Okay.
Taylor Hall. The real dollars that the Hawks would have had to hold on to if they retained on Taylor Hall is pretty similar to what they were retaining on Mikko Rantanen. And that was something that it sounded like, he didn't give himself credit, but it sounded like Tulsky thought of that and kind of explained it to Chicago, and then they were like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we can do that then. Because I think what Tulsky was saying was Chicago was probably approaching the deadline with the idea that they would have to retain on Taylor Hall on any Taylor Hall trade, but instead they retain on Rantanen, give up Hall, get an asset. It was an interesting explanation from Tulsky. That's on the sheet with Jeff Merrick. Go listen to it. Really, really good. Really good. Okay, let's get to the game against the Capitals. This segment of the show is brought to you by, we've talked about it before, HSBC Rugby Sevens, where high caliber rugby and the ultimate party weekend collide. SVNS is Western Canada's largest sporting event, and this year is the 10th anniversary of the event. From February 21st to 23rd, BC Place is the place to be. Grab your friends and your best costume and come on down for the best party in town. Tickets are on sale now at vansevens.com, starting from just $65 per day. Very happy to welcome back HSBC Rugby Sevens to the show. Always fun to have them on as a sponsor. They were with us last year. Nice to have them back this year. Make sure you get your tickets. vansevens.com. Okay, Harm. This game, Canucks actually show up to some extent against the Washington Capitals. A 2-1 victory. Unfortunately, the conversation is all about Quinn Hughes, and Quinn Hughes doing it all by himself. The Canucks captain scores 2 goals in the game. And it was an individual effort for Quinn Hughes. We know he's been this team's most valuable player all season long. We know he's going to be in the Hart Trophy conversation in some respect. Like, he's going to pick up votes. I'm not sure if he's going to be top 3 finalist. I'm not sure if he's going to win the award, but we know he's going to be in that conversation, that he has been in that conversation so far this season. Saturday night was a good example of that as the Canucks win 2-1. Hughes scoring both goals in that game, and really nothing happening either way on the ice when Hughes wasn't on the ice.
Both goals perfectly exemplified how he's leveled up from the point where a couple of years ago we looked at him unanimously as a top sort of like 5 or 6 defenseman in the league, to now he is, to me, the best defenseman in the NHL right now. The first goal, the way that he's able to slash into the middle and score off that backhand, I cannot emphasize enough how exceptionally difficult it is as a defenseman to take the puck from the point and cut into the slot. Right? The slot is the one area that teams are always trying to protect when they're in their defensive zone structure. They're willing to give you all the space on the outside. the slot is the prime real estate. And as a defenseman, when the opposition is already in their structure, to find a way to slash into the middle like that, it's a skill that he's really refined over the last year or so. Credit as well to Höglander there for how well he held onto the puck instead of turning it over, making sure the Canucks held on to full possession. The second goal, perfect reflection of how significantly his shot has improved. Of course, beautiful to see him walking across the blue line, creating space for himself. But the way that he picked the top corner through the maze of traffic to have that type of pinpoint accuracy, and now he's up to 14 goals in the season already. It just goes to show you when a player is obsessed with his craft, right? And a lot of players will talk about every day they want to get better. Like every player will publicly give the whole spiel about not getting complacent and always working on your game. I will tell you this much. Quinn Hughes is the most dedicated player I've ever seen, ever had the privilege of covering, as far as legitimately putting the work in behind the scenes to level up those individual skills, right? There's a scenario where a guy could have Quinn Hughes like talent and he doesn't reach this ceiling. He'd still be a special player, but he doesn't reach the ceiling if he doesn't have that type of dedication. This isn't just all world skill, right? That's part of it. It's all world skill meshed with an obsession with the game that I just haven't ever seen from another Vancouver Canuck that I've covered in my 6 seasons.
Absolutely. You hear about that dedication all the time. You see it. You see the results of it as well. We're going to talk more about Hughes, I'm sure, throughout the show. John Forsland, we pre-taped this interview. It's going to be coming up a little bit later in the show. He had some very, very high praise for Quinn Hughes as well. Of course, John Forsland, Prime Monday Night Hockey's John Forsland, play-by-play commentator. He'll be on the call tonight as the Canucks take on the Blues. That one is on Amazon Prime. So as I've said many times, you got a grandparent, you got a parent, they can't figure out how to go set it up. Go watch the game with them. I'm heading to Nonno's tonight. Excited to watch the game with him. But Forsland's going to join us later, and he was excellent. Busted out a Jim Rutherford impression, so look forward to that. But on this game against the Caps, Harm, I thought it was another quiet night for Elias Pettersson, quiet night for JT Miller, and this game has sparked a conversation all over social media. I saw Brendan Batchelor tweeting about it. I saw Jeff Patterson tweeting about it. I think Jason Bruff was tweeting about it as well. Batch had the tweet where he listed all of the players. I got to find it. Can we pull it up, Jacob? Did I give it to you? I did. Excellent. Look at me being prepared. Pius Suter, 0 goals in the last 23 games played. JT Miller, 0 goals in his last 9 games. DeBrusk, 0 goals in his last 9. Garland, 0 goals in his last 8. Pettersson, 1 goal in his last 8. Höglander, 1 goal in his last 39 games played. Besser, 2 goals in his last 12 played. Quinn Hughes, 5 goals in his last 5 games played. So that Hart Trophy case getting stronger and stronger, it would seem, as Quinn Hughes' teammates just completely hang him out to dry and make him do everything by himself. I gotta say, another impressive thing about Quinn Hughes is he hasn't come out and said anything that would even make you think for a second that he thinks he's doing this by himself. Like, he is always lifting up his teammates and always, like, he's talking like his teammates are putting up numbers, and he's talking like he sounds like a captain, and he's a great captain. We talk about it all the time, but that's the most impressive thing, because if that were me, I'm sorry, I would be throwing everybody under the bus, which is why I'm not an NHL captain.
You know what this is? This is like the group project where, like in school, one guy does 80 to 90% of the work, and he in fact like makes the whole slideshow presentation, tells other people in the group, this is your part, I've already laid out your script, just follow the script, I've done all the work. And then when the group feedback form comes out and you're supposed to grade like how helpful was everybody in the group, Quinn Hughes is still giving everybody like passing marks for just like not getting in his way, and even though he carried the whole thing. So that's honestly the vibes and the feeling around that.
That's so good. Yes, absolutely. I did want to get this in, though. Spencer Carberry. I'm not sure if you saw this post-game, Harb. Spencer Carberry had some praise for Elias Pettersson, and you and Tom will love this, because you guys were this guy's biggest fans at training camp. You told me this guy was making the team, first-line winger. Linus Karlsson getting some praise from Spencer Carberry, as did Elias Pettersson. Let's pull up the clip, Jacob.
We
Spencer
did
Carberry.
some good things, but when you're playing against a goaltender like that, like, you're going to have to work your way to the inside, screens, tips, like, it's interesting. So you'll look at Quinn Hughes and everybody will talk about how great he is, and he is great. I'm not taking anything away from him. Creates those 2 goals, but for me, those goals are Karlsson and Pettersson. Score those goals because they just anchored themselves right on top of Chucky and he couldn't see the puck. So yeah, it's a great shot by Hughes, but those two guys are willing to go to the net, and we just weren't. We did in the third period, and you see Dubois gets rewarded for it. We're all over the net, Protoss and the screen, and I just felt like it was one of those games tonight where we didn't do a good enough job getting to the inside, and they did on 2 plays, and that's the difference.
That is the first time an opposing head coach has ever mentioned Linus Karlsson's name in an NHL press conference. I looked it up.
Probably the last two.
Maybe the last. And it is the first time Elias Pettersson's gotten praise from any coach in a post-game press conference. No, I'm joking. But some high praise there for Pettersson and for Linus Karlsson. And I wanted to at least mention that from the Caps head coach. And just quickly on Spencer Carberry, I really like him. I really like how he talks the game. Even his explanations there, you can tell he's speaking from the heart. And Tocchet does that too, which I like. I don't want to pull up the whole post-game press conference, but it was another low-event game for the Canucks, and everybody pointing at Tocchet system. Tocchet was practically begging his players to start hanging on to pucks and going into the middle. Like, I'm sure Tocchet's starting to see some of this stuff about Tocchet hockey, quote-unquote, and he's saying, like, yeah, I want guys to hold on to pucks. I want them to cut into the middle, and I want them to make plays east-west. What did you make of that game and just the conversation around Rick Tocchet right now?
I was going to bring that post-game press conference up myself because when you look at the Canucks offensive strategy and sort of the I shouldn't even say strategy necessarily, but the way that they execute when they have the puck in the offensive end, it's been painful since the second half of last season to see how reliant they are on working the puck back to the point and just spamming point shots. We know how inefficient point shots are in today's NHL. It relies on lucky bounces, and yes, there is some variables that you have control over as far as how effective are your forwards going to be at setting up screens, taking away the goaltender's eyes. I get that, but you're really way too reliant on just getting lucky bounces, and that's been so painful. And to hear Tocchet say 1,000,000%, it's a problem that we are way too reliant on low to high, that we defer to the point man way too often. Like, that's really telling that that's not the way Tocchet wants the Canucks to play and attack offensively. He also made it clear that he's mentioned it to the players throughout the season. This isn't some recent new trend, and I think that's an important insight for all the people that think Tocchet is the biggest problem with this team.
Yeah, absolutely. He's part of the problem, and that's what we've been saying all season long, is he's part of the problem. But, like, look, when you defer to the point, and this is another thing he's talked about, is it's really easy to defer to the point when the guy at the point is Quinn Hughes, right? Like, of course you're going to be looking for Quinn Hughes. Of course you are. But you also have to take a responsibility for yourself. And what is Quinn Hughes doing, Harm? He's cutting into the middle. Did you know forwards are allowed to cut into the middle as well and take shots like that? Did you know that's available to you? Because right now I don't think the Canucks forwards do. And hey, you know what? You hope that they can build off it. This is a game tonight against the Blues, and we're going to talk about it with Prime Monday Night Hockey's John Forsland, who will be on the call tonight. We'll get to that interview in a second here. But Harm, this is a game when we talk about playoff implications. It is late January. It feels like we're back in the Benning era. We're like, this game is a must-win game almost for the Canucks. They got to have their A game tonight. And again, when you talk about consistency, you talk about buy-in, all these sorts of things we've talked about where the games are one good, one bad, or two bad, one good. It comes down to buy-in, and you have to hope that the players recognize that it's time. It's time to start putting in these consistent efforts now.
For sure. One thing before we get away from the conversation around the Caps game, Kevin Lankinen was super sharp. I thought he and Hughes were really the two catalysts. Now, I will also say, from a team perspective, it was encouraging that, for example, they hit 20 shots around the midway point of the game, right? Like, how often has that happened this season? They were possessing the puck. I also thought in the second period, they were excellent defensively. They were winning puck battles down low in the offensive zone to keep possessions alive. I love the way that they disrupted the Caps' neutral zone play. As they were trying to transition the puck up the ice, I think it prevented Washington from being able to pick up a lot of steam, pick up a lot of speed through the neutral zone, and it prevented them from being able to create a lot of rush chances. For me, with how little the Canucks generate offensively, though, as we now sort of look ahead at the St. Louis game, it's so clear that they need the type of defensive effort that they got from the Canucks in the second period, that has to be like every night.
That's what it was
with how
last
little
year.
they score.
That's what it was last year as well, right? Like that was the consistent buy-in that they got every night. That's what I'm saying is like if you haven't done it yet to this point of the season, let's be honest, they haven't. Like now is the time. Now is the time. From now all through the playoffs, it's go time. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
The issue though is your margins are so fine if that's what you have to lean on, especially because last year you had the benefit of Thatcher Demko playing at a Vezina level as opposed to credit to Kevin Lankinen. He's been solid. He's exceeded expectations this year, but he's not a Vezina caliber goaltender. And so when you're reliant on where you need good goaltending and you need elite defensive play, because since January 1st, the Canucks are averaging 1.8 goals per game. They're dead last in the NHL. Like your margin for victory is pretty fine. You need everything to work, and it can. But this is why as promising as that victory of the Caps was, it wasn't the type of formula where you look at and go, well, they can sustain this all the time, right? Like their only 2 goals came from Quinn Hughes, and I know they had other scoring chances. JT Miller was really close on a couple of them, but like their margins for victory at this point are really slim, and we'll see if they can finally start following up some of their defensive efforts with consistency now.
Kevin Lankinen, 2 goals saved above expected, according to Natural Stat Trick, and according to Michael Liu, who writes the Statsies for us, the analytics-based post-game report over at CanucksArmy.com. I want to talk more about Kevin Lankinen and the quote-unquote goalie controversy going on in Vancouver. I want to talk about that, how the Canucks manage Lankinen, how they manage Demko, but we're going to get to that in anyone else, and we'll talk a little bit more about this game against the Blues. But before we do that, before we get to anyone else, we pre-recorded this. It's about 15-16 minutes long. We'll be back on the other side to do anyone else and wrap up the show. I wanted to get to this interview from earlier today with Monday Night Hockey's Prime Monday Night Hockey's John Forsland, which is brought to you by our friends at Toyota, the Pacific Toyota dealers, who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X is packed with all the things you want in an SUV, like the room to fit all your family, friends, hockey bags, and whatever else you've got. And of course, the BZ4X is backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $12,500 in rebates and incentives, and now you can finance a 2024 BZ4X from 0.19% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. Let's get to it. Our interview from earlier today with Prime Monday Night Hockey's John Forsland. Very pleased to be joined now by the play-by-play commentator for the Prime Monday Night Hockey broadcast. You've heard him all season long. We've had a few Prime games out here in Vancouver. John Forsland joins us now. John, how you doing?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you joining us today. Coming to us from a hotel room in St. Louis, I would assume. Yes, heading down.
They found one for me. Can you believe it?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Heading down to the game. Just tonight's game, these two teams, like, what are you expecting to see?
Who knows? How's that for an answer? I mean, when you look at the importance of the game, which is really important for both teams, you look at the state of the union for the Canucks, you look at the Blues with a coaching change already and kind of where they're at. You have two desperate teams. So I hope it's a lively Monday night. I hope Vancouver comes out looking to start a road trip on time. And I know the Blues are after that. They were very disappointed with their first period on Saturday night here against Dallas. So I think they'll be charged up at home.
Quinn Hughes has been the main storyline in Vancouver here. It feels like every night he's putting the team on his back. Another 2-goal performance against the Capitals. It's interesting because when Quinn first came into the league, I think everybody knew that he was going to be a really special player. But the last season or so, seeing just his evolution, winning the Norris Trophy, he's found that next gear, that next level. Locally, we're always in awe of him. I'm curious what you think just nationally, seeing him level up and whether that's caught you by surprise.
Well, you should be. You know, everybody should be in awe of this player. This player will go down as one of the great players to play the game. Hopefully, you know, injury-free, and he has a long career. Hopefully he can touch a Stanley Cup at some point because he'll deserve it. We were talking about him with Jody Shelley and Thomas Hickey this morning at the skate. And if there's one player, and both these guys made this statement, there's one player that's utmost important. And this is all due respect to the two big guys in Edmonton. But we can see when one of those guys comes out, they're okay. You take both out, which is likely not to happen, who knows. But Quinn Hughes, based on the makeup of this team, is so important and so valuable. And he really makes them run. And it all starts from him. And he accepted the captaincy at a young age. And to me, I'm intrigued by it because I'm around him a little bit, but on the outside. And he appears like he's a very underassuming young guy who is going to lead by example. But I think he has more of a competitive fire than he lets out. I think we see it on the ice. We'll never see what goes on inside the walls of the room. But I think there's a presence there. There has to be. There's built-in respect. This is a tremendous hockey player that we're lucky enough to watch. And listen, I'm old enough to go over a lot of different generations of players, right? And I've seen the game change. And I remember a day when an undersized guy like him might not have a chance to play in the National Hockey League. And how stupid were we at that time? Because think about the skill level. And I know there were a lot of guys who played the game like him who had to go to Europe to make a living. Or play in the American League and maybe get a sniff, come playoff time, only because of their size. But Quinn Hughes defends way above his size. He defends by possessing the puck. He backs everybody off. You guys know this. You get to watch him all the time. So I don't have to tell the Canuck fan base about how great he is. But I can just tell you from my standpoint, I love watching him play. I love calling games when he has the puck because anything can happen.
John, you spent years in Carolina. You obviously crossed paths with Jim Rutherford at that point. With all the noise around this team right now, like, look, Miller, Pettersson, these guys' names are both out there right now. Like, what do you think is going through Jim Rutherford's head right now?
I think, the thing about Jim, he's got the experience, that's obvious. But with that experience comes a great deal of patience and the ability to block out outside noise and have the courage of his convictions. And I believe he has all that. And I think he and Patrick obviously work very well together. And I think they have, I don't know Patrick that well, but it seems like he has the same type of personality. Whereas, they're not going to panic. And this is unfortunate what's happened here because he's really not, I don't believe that Jimmy's in a position of strength right now. And he wants to be. He wants to be in a position of strength to make the best deal for the Canucks. He's just not going to make a deal. I don't know if addition by subtraction is the best thing to do here because you got a team that showed last year what they have and the framework of where they can go. And I don't think you just take that type of player, or if it's Pettersson, I don't think you just take that player off the roster and just life goes on with a futures deal. I think he's trying to make a really good deal. I don't know when that happens. I do know, as you both do, that the situation is off the charts right now with everybody talking about it.
In the local market, there's been some discussion around whether the Canucks play too boring of a style, low event. They've had trouble generating shots in offense all year. I think since January 1st, they've scored the fewest goals per game in the NHL, where it's almost like Quinn Hughes, the offense is all on him. But outside of that, the team's maybe been tough to watch and had a real tough time generating offense. I'm curious because you have a broader perspective on the league. What stands out about the Canucks playing style? And in your mind, is it too limited in terms of offensive creativity?
I think it's too limited in terms of the depth they have. I think when you go down the lines and you start getting to the bottom six, if you guys look around at rosters and you look at the teams that are real and are elite right now in that cycle, the bottom half of the forward group supports everything because at some point they're going to be asked to score. And certainly that's going to happen in the playoffs. Yes, your big players will always, you hope, come through. The old adage of best players have to be best. We hear that 8,000 times a week, around the league. But it is true, but it doesn't always happen. So I believe, when you look at it, and it's funny because you ask about a team that's maybe boring to watch. And I know the team that I cover on a regular basis, Seattle, they've tried to open up their game. And I think what they've done is over the previous 3 seasons where Dave Hackstall kind of laid down a defensive foundation, they've robbed Peter to pay Paul. And so Biles must come in. He's tried to make them a little bit more offensive minded, north with the puck, but it's opened up some problems through the middle of the ice and certainly in the D zone. Rick knows what he's doing. I mean, he's got a great track record. And most of the coaches will tell you around the league that all great offensive plays come from defensive hockey first. So you got to have that. I just think there's a lot going on right now. I'm not going to say it's unworkable, but as an outsider, it might be. You know, when you look at the Canucks and the environment they have, I don't know how everybody gets in a positive vein just by showing up at the rink and saying, okay, guys, we're ready to go. It's a new day. Let's go. I think this thing is hanging over them. At some point, they're gonna reach a breaking point. I think they're happy to be away from home right now. And I think tonight's game will show us a lot about where they're going to go this week. And really, when you're, a handful of points off the line in the West, it's really about what you do this week. It really is.
It's must-win territory. Quinn Hughes is talking about how they're scoreboard watching, and how could they not be right now. John, turning back the clock a little bit here. 2011, Game 7, Chicago. You were on the call for the Alex Burrows goal.
Yeah.
We talk a lot in this market about that goal, how that was it was overtime. It could have gone either way, and that was probably the end of that core. If they lost that game, they don't get another chance. What do you remember from that goal, that game? Could you feel it in the building, what that goal actually meant?
I remember exhausting travel all the way from Raleigh at the time to Vancouver because we weren't a lock to do the game. Darryl Ray and I did the game for then Versus, if you guys even recall that. So Versus was the rights holder in the United States coming out of the second lockout, the canceled season. So, we were scheduled to do another series, or we're on another series. I did some of that series, and then we were scheduled to go Game 7. So it was a big assignment for both of us. Flew out there. We got out there, and I remember the game and the circumstances because Darryl's one of my great friends. So we had a chance to work that game. We started together in Hartford in '95. So this was kind of a great moment personally for us. Turned into a franchise moment for the Canucks. Chicago was who they were. And I remember Alex Burrows scoring. I remember him going around to the other side. I forgot what I said. I hope it was good. And I remember the elation of the crowd. And I've been in Vancouver a lot in my career, and I really enjoy it there. And I love the fans there. I think the building, is there's something to it. I'm a traditionalist, so I go back many years. I remember Orland Kurtenbach. That's how old I am. So, this has always been a franchise that deserves a lot more than they've received, and I feel their pain. I think that's the thing. When you've been in the game almost 40 years, you feel the pain of a fan base like the Canucks just aching for this.
I'm curious because Quads alluded to it earlier. You spent a lot of time in Carolina. I'm sure you got to know Jim Rutherford pretty well. He's a big time character, big time personality. Even just the limited few years that I've had a chance to get to know him. Do you have any cool Rutherford stories from your time working in Carolina?
Jimmy is single-handedly responsible for launching my career. There are a few people that have touched me in the minor leagues. It was a guy named Jim Roberts, a long time, and obviously we're in St. Louis. It's ironic. I'm going to talk about him on the show tonight at the top during our pregame thing. Jimmy really helped me learn about the game, my place in the business, how to go about being a broadcaster in professional hockey. Worked with them the last 3 years. I was in Springfield. They won 2 Calder Cups back-to-back in my last 2 years there. And then I went to Hartford and went through the upheaval of ownership change. And Mr. Karmanos came in with Jim Rutherford, and they bought the team. And Jimmy entrusted me in the first couple of years to be a management person because that's where I was and just doing a little radio work, but I was still doing freelance TV work on the side, and that's what I wanted to do. Jimmy made some things happen for me in 1995, and I was able to become the voice of the Whalers on television in that season. And then we had one more year, and then we left. And he asked me to come to Raleigh, and it was the greatest thing. I had 1 year left on my contract. Greatest thing I did at the time for my career, most importantly for my family. We're able to raise 3 children there in Raleigh. Jimmy was always fair with me, always, and I always negotiated with Jimmy. I was a team employee. So I think when I started to feel my oats a little bit as I got older and I started to do more national work, I think I was up for a contract, and I went in and we went at it. It wasn't good. And I had an agent at the time, but Jimmy didn't like to deal with agents. He wanted to deal with me personally because he felt he was almost like a father figure. Okay. So I'm going to go see my professional dad, and we're going to sit down and try and iron out a contract. I went home, told my wife, I said it was just awful. I don't know what kind of mood he was in. This was terrible. So I went back for round 2 and I sat down with him, and I got in there and I was all fired up, and I was like, gave it to him, and he sat back in his seat, and I thought he was going to fire me. And with all due respect, I do impersonate him a little bit. He's back in his chair and he goes, "Now you're negotiating. Good for you. I think we got a deal." And I couldn't believe it. And we did the deal, and I love him. I really do. I know. Listen, when you're GM in the NHL, you polarize your fans. People like you, people don't like you. You're the villain. You're this, you're that. I know one thing. He's a lot younger than his age. He's always rolled with the changes. Look at that organization, the people they've hired. And Patrick is a really good general manager. So I'm a biased opinion on Jim Rutherford. He meant a lot to me.
That's a great story. I love that. And hey, any day we get a Jim Rutherford impression on the show is a great day. John, final thing for me, just these Prime broadcasts, we've talked about them all season long. They've been an excellent product. When you got approached to do them, was it kind of like a no-brainer just to immediately do it?
Well, I had about a 90-minute Zoom with the people in April. And they asked me about it, if I'd be interested or if I could do it. And obviously I can do it. I thank the Kraken for allowing me to miss a few games. I'm missing one tonight in order to do this. Really great of the people I work with out in Seattle. But what they did in that Zoom call was ask me my opinion on how I call a hockey game. And guys, no one has ever asked me that in my entire career. I've been hired and I've done games, but no one's ever asked me about how and why I do certain things. So when I came away from that and no job was offered at the time, I said to my wife, that's the first time that's ever happened. But I appreciated the fact that they listened to me, because if you watch these games, we put the game first. The game, it's all about the game. We come on the air 45 minutes before our pregame show and show you visuals of the city and the arena, the concession stands, the fans. We have little segments that we roll in, the mic up the players during the warm-up live, all these different things. I hope it brings people closer to this wonderful game. And we have so many cameras, so many resources. We got a great producer in Mark Askin who does a fantastic job. It's a fast-moving show. I don't think we miss anything. I think we present the game. We have to. We present the game the best we can because we're going to Canadian markets. We're going to Canadian fans. We're going into Vancouver tonight where they're used to an outstanding broadcast. And what are we going to do now, right? And that American play caller better not screw up, right? Because they're ready to jump on me. And that's okay because we all make mistakes, and I will. But I really love this. This has come at a great time for me personally, but most importantly for the NHL. I think the games have been great. I think the fans have soaked this up. Our replays, we even have more natural sounds in our audio mix than most broadcasts. You can hear everything, including us. Usually if you hear everything, the skates and sticks and whistles, and it'll drown out the announcers a little bit. For some reason, they're able to bring it all together with the crowd so that you hear that it is loud. Sometimes it's just the way the games are produced audio-wise. You could have the crowd going crazy and it won't sound like it. So at home, you don't get that feeling. I hope when you watch Amazon on Monday nights, you get the feeling that you're at the game. That's what we're trying to do. And we've had some great games so far. We really have. So hopefully tonight's another one.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. John, thanks so much for taking the time today. We greatly appreciate it. And we will hear from you tonight.
Thank you both. And you guys keep up the great work. Okay. You're doing a great job. You're the next generation, right? I'll be done here. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe this will be the end. I don't know. This will be my last podcast, but I listen to you guys a lot. You do a great job because as we go around the league, you're the pulse of the fans. You're the pulse of the teams, and you help us a lot too. So keep it up.
Appreciate that. That's super nice. Thank you, John.
You guys, boys. Take care.
Thank you.
There he is, John Forsland. All right. First of all, John Forsland listens to Canucks Convo. That was the most that caught both of us off guard, I think, Hard, when he said that at the end. A huge shout out to John Forsland for doing that with us. We had a great time. But yeah, saying he listens to us all the time. And I mean, I think that's why the conversation was so easy, was he seems to know who we are already.
Yeah, that was awesome. And nothing will top that Jim Rutherford story. That was one of the best Jim Rutherford stories I've ever heard. That was by far the highlight of maybe any interview we've done this season.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was awesome. Like the Rutherford impression, any day we get a Rutherford impression is a great episode. Now, I'm not sure if this person in the chat is trying to set me up perfectly for an ad read, but Scott White in the chat said, how the hell do you get the game if you don't have the feed at home or in a bar? And I responded and just talked about, yeah, you got to get Amazon Prime or a family member that does. Same thing you do if you don't have cable. And there's plenty of bars that have them on. He said, ridiculous. Give me an example of a bar that will have the game on. Folks, it's time for anyone else, and it's brought to you by Greta Bar YVR, a great spot for all games, home and away, Prime games as well. Greta is the spot for the fans. You see, if you drive past it, you'll see the Canucks Army logo is on the front of Greta, so you won't miss it. Greta Bar YVR is the place to be. You can go watch the game, plenty of big screen TVs, the street food menu, the drink menu as well, and of course all the arcade games. Scott, it's honestly a great place. You'll really enjoy it. Just go with a couple buddies. You'll really have a good time at Greta. Really, really good time every time at Greta. We had a good time at our watch party there on Thursday. So shout out to Greta. Shout out to Scott for setting me up for the ad read. Greta Bar YVR. Address is 50 West Cordova Street. Let the games begin. Okay, Harm, I want to get this and anyone else. The goalie controversy between Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen. I said last week that you got to give Demko a run of games even if he's not playing his best, because the way to get his game back to where it was is to get him into games and let him get his timing down. That being said, what's it been, 16 goals in the last 5 games for Demko? It's bad. It's bad right now, and I understand that. So that being said, I do want to have this conversation because I think the overwhelming opinion in the fan base now is, well, you got to ride Kevin Lankinen, and I get it. You got to make the playoffs. I understand that. I don't have a hard take on this. The only thing that I would tell people to keep in mind is, okay, but you have to look beyond just making the playoffs this season, which obviously, sure, Kevin Lankinen gives you the best chance of doing right now. You have to look beyond this season and understand that, and I mean, I saw someone in the Canucks Army comment section saying Demko's not ready. Rest him again. He's not ready to go. Let him have more time off. That's not the case here. Demko needs to play games. He needs to get his timing down if he's going to figure it out. That being said, the Canucks also need to make the playoffs. Like that's what you're coming at it as a fan. So it's an interesting conversation. I don't know if it's necessarily controversial to say that Kevin Lankinen should be getting more starts at this point in time until he doesn't deserve that, but he certainly does deserve it right now. I'm assuming he's going to be the starter tonight against St. Louis, but like, where do you weigh in on this whole conversation? Because for me, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, it's Lankinen, but let's also have the conversation about what it is beyond this season when it comes to the Vancouver goal crease.
Yeah, I think initially I was thinking, okay, given how well Lankinen had been playing, like a couple of weeks ago, I think we had this conversation and Demko had initially struggled that. My thought process was, okay, you're not necessarily going to ride Lankinen, but you can't just give Demko the starter's crease back. Now, because Lankinen had a stinker against Winnipeg and because he also got the flu, we ended up in a situation where Demko had an opportunity to get a potential run of games. And I was behind that idea. I was curious to see how he'd perform. And again, the thought there was, okay, maybe Lankinen's workload has been catching up to him a little bit. His performance had been slipping a bit. Demko got 4 starts in a row. And I know that's not the longest sample size, but he's had a significant run of games lately. And did he have one good start out of those 4 games? He only won one of them. And the win that he did pick up was against the Oilers, where they only allowed 15 shots in the first place. He didn't really face any grade A chances that game. He's had an .833 save percentage. It hasn't gotten any better. If it was starting to, trend in the right direction, you could say, all right, he deserves a longer leash. But especially when Lankinen turns in the type of performance that he did on Saturday night, not saying that you got to play the wheels off Lankinen. I think you have to find a middle ground where you're getting Demko enough games to where hopefully he's able to build a positive trajectory in his game, while also making sure that Lankinen's workload isn't so excessive that his performance starts to slip. I think that's the middle ground that you're searching for. But yeah, I don't think you can really afford to say we're going to keep trotting Demko out there as our 1A when it's not working, even when he's gone a run of games lately.
You do need to find the happy medium, and that's all I'm trying to say, is that you have to think beyond this year as well. We don't know what Kevin Lankinen's going to be doing. There was a goaltender contract extension signed today, Logan Thompson, 6 years, $6 million with the Washington Capitals, a big contract handed out to Logan Thompson. So you have to think beyond this season, and that's all I'm trying to say, is that you don't know what you're going to have with Kevin Lankinen, and you don't know what you're going to have with Thatcher Demko. The most likely outcome, whether people like it or not, is that Kevin Lankinen is here, that Thatcher Demko is here next year and Kevin Lankinen probably isn't. Like, I think right now, I don't know if you disagree with me, but I think that's probably the most likely outcome, is that Kevin Lankinen's gone and Thatcher Demko's here next year. And all I'm saying is that the Canucks need to think about that fact, if that is what they think is going to happen, and understand that you need to have that balance right now so that next season, Demko's back at that level and he's still not in this figuring it out process and getting his feet back under him. Now, that being said, he's going to have a full offseason, you hope, and of course training camp as well, so it should help him ramp back up. But right now, like, again, I even look at a guy like Jeremy Swayman, who started his season a little late, and he's started to get going now, but remember how awful his season started? Goaltenders need time. And it's all about timing, and it's all about rhythm, and it's a weird rhythm to come back to if you're Thatcher Demko when you were off as long as he was. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes, but I just wanted to at least bring it up when we talk about this goaltending stuff, that it's not so much a controversy as more as it is, okay, think about this as well when you're thinking about Lankinen starting. And Mike Levesque, regular listener of the show, saying he does not want to see Demko anymore at all, it seems. So Kevin Lankinen, again, I assume Kevin Lankinen is going to start tonight. Demko only started those 4 straight games because Kevin Lankinen got sick as well. It is worth mentioning. I think 3 and 4 were more because Lankinen was sick, but going to be Kevin Lankinen tonight, we would assume. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I at least wanted to bring it up in the conversation of all this. Do you have anything else with goaltending? The last thing I want to get to is Elias Pettersson's NHL debut.
Let's talk DPD.
Okay. I think he's the 3rd or 4th best defenseman on the team already. Great news for Elias Pettersson, bad news for the rest of the team. Mark Friedman was the one that was sent down. DPD is on this road trip. I hope he gets into games, Harm. I really liked what I saw from him. And again, I was talking about it the week of his debut. All of last week, I was talking about how I went out to that Abbotsford game and really liked what I saw, clamoring for him to get a look. He gets the look, which I was really, really happy to see. He's going to eventually go back down. Like, they're going to let him go down to the AHL All-Star game. They're not going to say, nope, you need to play in the NHL right now. You're not going to go to the AHL All-Star game. Like, they're going to let him go enjoy that weekend, I'm sure. But, like, even if this is just a taste of what you're going to get from Elias Pettersson, and even if it is just that 5-game audition that this management regime likes to give players, I really liked what I saw in game number 1 from Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, he fared really well for it being his debut. I want to see him get another look. He's definitely raw, but there's a lot of potential there. And you saw that he has legitimately good wheels skating back for pucks when opposing teams dump it in, which is huge. We saw the puck rush in the second period that everybody was clipping, where it wasn't just a clean exit, but also a clean offensive zone entry. And later on that same shift where he had rushed the puck up the ice, he showed good gap control and then disrupted a pass into the slot. So it wasn't just what he was doing with the puck there. I liked his defensive positioning and how he used his long reach to be effective without the puck as well. That said, he is still raw, right? Like, I also want to make sure that for as promising as it was, and I was impressed, that we pump the brakes, just because I think sometimes when there's the first sign of life from a young player or prospect, people think, oh, he's here, like, play him top 4 minutes. He shouldn't get sent down for the remainder of the season at all. And, like, that's where I would just say, as far as him being raw, and again, these aren't concerns at all long-term. This is just, okay, something to keep an eye on, something that he'll improve on. is his ability to make plays with the puck are still a little bit hit and miss, right? Like we saw some of the positives, but we also saw like there was one shift in the second period where he failed to settle a puck on a defensive zone retrieval. He cleanly just kind of lost possession, and Wilson got a great A chance in the slot as a result of that. His first couple of zone exits of the game weren't great as well. It was like one of them, he wheeled around the net and you're like, okay, this is good speed, but the glass and out didn't clear the zone. I think his second exit attempt was an icing, which again, no problem. Rookie nerves, first NHL game, like overall really impressive debut. And I would keep him in the lineup, like with Tyler Myers drawing back in. Like I would rather DPD in the lineup at this point than Vincent Desharnais for sure. But I also want to say, like, let's temper our expectations and understand and be prepared that there are probably going to be ups and downs for DPD as he becomes familiar with the NHL because he is so young.
Okay, on that note, there is a shift-by-shift breakdown that we have just sent into the chat, in the YouTube chat. You can go find it at CanucksArmy.com, courtesy of Tyson Cole. It's a really good article. The latest edition of The Tape, a shift-by-shift breakdown of Elias Pettersson's debut. I will say this, Arm, really liked what I saw from him in his debut. Pretty clear he's raw and is going to need more time in the AHL. Like, that's my personal opinion. He's going to need more time, and he still has a lot of growing to do. Still think he's the third or fourth best defenseman on this team. The other thing is that the guys around him that are behind him in that list aren't getting any better, and he is getting better. So I think that's where the promising sign of it is, but I agree with you. I would have him in this lineup over a couple guys, I think, but we will see. We will see what happens with Elias Pettersson. It's game number 2. I don't know if he's going to be in tonight. We don't have much lineup info because the Canucks didn't have a morning skate in St. Louis tonight, but we will see tonight. The game starts in about an hour and a half. We somehow went overtime. Our thanks to John Forsland for being on today's show. He is going to be on the broadcast tonight. Let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day as we wrap up today's show. Harmon, I got to tell you, the Pittsburgh Penguins, no. The New Jersey Devils are favorites right now, but not by a super wide margin, which comes as a bit of a surprise to me as they take on the Philadelphia Flyers. I am taking the New Jersey Devils at minus 155 odds. You can get that at Bet365. Devils moneyline minus 155 against the Philadelphia Flyers. That was our bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. We'll wrap it up there, folks. For my co-host, Harmon Dallin, and technical producer, Jacob Lazar, my name is Dave Quadrelli. Thanks so much for this episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.